Hello, hello, and welcome back to Finding Better. My name is John Suzuki, and I am your host. And this is a place where we have real life people, real life cool people, sharing real life experiences on things that they've done in their lives to find better and how they found better, and on whatever the topic is we're talking about. It's really, really cool because it's real life stuff. We're not telling you what to do. We're not telling you our opinions. We're not talking about ideas or theories. We're talking about real life stuff that perhaps you can learn from and apply to your own life. Okay, so this episode, a couple of weeks ago, I was invited to speak at an annual event called the Japan United States Military Program. And this is an annual event celebrating the military relationship and the alliance between the United States and Japan. And I was asked to talk about my book. As a lot of you know, this is my book, American Grit, from a Japanese American concentration camp, rises an American war hero. And they asked me to talk about the second generation Japanese Americans, otherwise known as Niseis, and what they did as they were incarcerated in concentration camps and volunteered to fight for the United States Army and went on to become some of the most decorated war heroes in US history. And they also asked me to talk about the guys who fought Japan, the Japanese Americans who fought Japan. And we talked about what they did to rebuild the relationships between the United States and Japan as translators and negotiators, and um, and setting the foundation for the relationship that we all now enjoy today. So here it is. It's about 15 minutes long. I hope you like it. And many of you are kind of related to the book that I wrote. And so I had to think about it, and I finally said, okay, I will. And then I asked the question, who else is going to be here? And he said, well, there's going to be the Consul General of Japan, two rear admirals, a major general, and a whole bunch of different dignitaries. And I have to tell you, folks, I've done a lot of public speaking. I have never been so close to throwing up and peeing in my pants at the same time. And so I can't tell you, it is such an honor for me to be here. And I want to tell you, I'll tell you the journey that I went on as I wrote this book. I'm actually I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do this. As I wrote this book, American Grit, from a Japanese American concentration camp, rises an American war hero. And my journey found me on a bus to the former Japanese American concentration camp at Minidoka in Idaho. I had no idea why I was there because my parents were not incarcerated at Minidoka, but there was a series of, I'll call it, miracles and divine intervention that got me there. On the third day of this trip, I discovered this. It was an honor roll that listed the names of all the men who volunteered to fight and die out of the Minidoka concentration camp for the United States Army. The same army that put them and their families in those camps to begin with, and the same army that kept their families incarcerated while they went off to war. For the first 2 days, I couldn't figure out why I was there. When I saw this, I understood immediately why I was there. I knew about the concentration camps. I knew about the 442nd. I knew about the military intelligence service. I knew about the Niseis in World War II. I did not know about this. I did not know about the men who volunteered out of those camps to fight and die for the United States. And it was at that moment that I decided that the shortest distance between today and the American psyche was a major motion picture. And I wanted to, I'm a businessman. I wanted to take that and take that as a project. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to find somebody. I wanted to find a soldier, a Nisei soldier, who volunteered for the army out of Minidoka and fought in two famous battles that I knew of. One was called the Lost Battalion. The other one was called the Battle of the Gothic Line. And after weeks of research, I came across this gentleman, Shiro Kashino. You guys, many of you probably know him. And I was very disappointed to learn later that he had passed away 11 years prior because I had started this in 2008. And so I decided that I would try to reach his family. And I met his widow, Louise Cascino, and magnificent, magnificent woman. Now it turns out that Louise, as a profession, was a legal secretary. So she had everything. I mean, she lit up my entire path in researching this book. And so we know about the concentration camps, where 120,000 people, 2/3 of whom were American citizens, were rounded up, evicted, and incarcerated in concentration camps, 50,000 of whom were American children and babies. And the reason was because they looked like the Japanese enemy. That was it. And so this is a picture of the former gate in front of Minidoka. And these concentration camps, there were 10 major concentration camps sprinkled across the deserts and swamps of America. These were not in the places anybody wants to live. They were in 100-degree plus temperatures, below freezing temperatures, and they were basically relegated to shacks made of lumber and tar paper. And out of those ashes rose these men who volunteered, who answered the call to fight for the United States. And they all congregated at Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Now, the first round of volunteers were made up of volunteers from Hawaii and volunteers from the mainland. A lot of you folks know this. And by the way, for those of you who know this story and are very intimate with it, I ask you to kind of think about it as if you never heard it before. Because this is why I wrote the book, was to educate people, the vast majority of people out there who don't know about this anymore. And so they trained in Mississippi, in the Deep South. 2/3 of them roughly were from Hawaii. 1/3 of them roughly were from the mainland and from the camps. What was interesting, they despised each other. These Japanese Americans despised each other because the folks from the mainland spoke the Queen's English. The folks from Hawaii spoke Pidgin English because they grew up in the plantations. And so they thought that the mainland guys were stuck up. Constant fighting. It was so bad that they gave each other nicknames. The mainland guys called the Hawaii guys pig heads or Buddha heads. And the Hawaii guys called the mainland guys katonks, because when he smacked them on the head, it made the sound katonk. I'm a katonk. I'm a proud katonk. A lot of you guys are katonks. But then what happened was that they almost had to disband the 442nd because they were fighting so much. And they decided to take a group of the Hawaiian guys to a party at a camp. And these guys thought that they were going to go to a party for a dance. What they ended up in was a Roar concentration camp. They had no clue that the mainland Japanese had families in these camps. And when they got back to Camp Shelby, it is said that they went back to all the other Hawaiian folks, and it was that night that they all became brothers, and the 442nd started and was born. So they had all kinds of things that they had to deal with. Their first deployment, they were deployed to Italy, and they were involved with 7 major campaigns. And so the first battle I want to talk to you about is the Battle of the Lost Battalion. A battalion of men, of Americans, were surrounded by 6,000 Germans and had no hope to being rescued. They eventually, after 3 days and 2 battalions, American battalions, trying to rescue them, they did not rescue them. They brought in the 442nd. And the 3rd day, they broke through, and they rescued the Lost Battalion. This is where they were. This is an area of where the Lost Battalion had fought from. In the process, they saved 211 men, and they sustained over 800 casualties of Japanese Americans. It became known as one of the 10 greatest battles in U.S. history, and this portrait is hung in the Pentagon. Then, the following year, in 1945, they were deployed to Italy to the Battle of the Gothic Line. This is a picture that I took of the Gothic Line. Now, The Gothic Line is the Apennine Mountains that spans across Italy, east to west, across the whole country. In the history of battle, history of warfare, no army had ever displaced the army on top of the Gothic Line. The entire Fifth Army could not displace the Germans over 6 months of fighting. The 442nd came in and they proposed a different plan. Instead of fighting up known access routes, they proposed to go up the back cliff side of the mountain, hoping and expecting that the Germans were not guarding this side of the mountain range. And so after 2 days of marching, they finally got to the base, climbed 3,000 feet with full battle gear, and they were told not to scream if they fell, because if they screamed, they could be detected. And Cash said that if they were detected, there'd be 5,000 dead Japanese Americans at the bottom of that mountain. They made it to the top, undetected. The Germans were still sleeping. And then at daybreak, they gave the order, and they routed the Germans, and they took over the western end of the Gothic Line. This is Mount Folgorito. This is the mountain that anchors the west side of the Gothic Mountains. And this is a view from the top of the Gothic Mountains to the little village. This little village right here is called the village of Azzano. And this picture is from the Gothic Line looking down at Azzano. And you can see it's virtually straight down. And this is a little bit more about the terrain. And over here is Mount Folgorito. And you can't see it, but there's a cross up there. But this is the terrain they fought through. It was unbelievable. And they accomplished in 8 hours what the entire Fifth Army couldn't accomplish in 6 months. It was unbelievable. So then, wrong button. They became, the 442nd became the most decorated combat unit in the history of the United States for its size and duration. This is President Truman presenting them with the Distinguished Presidential Award, which is basically the equivalent of Distinguished Service Cross for the unit. And the war ended. Less than a month after they were victorious in Italy, Italy surrendered. A week later, Germany surrendered. The camps closed. Everybody was given $25 and a one-way bus ticket home. And a lot of folks came home to this. This gentleman is Daniel Inouye. He served in the United States Senate for 49 years. Passed away in 2012. When he returned from the war, he went into a barber shop to get a haircut. Full uniform, missing his arm. And the barber said, "You need to read that sign." And the sign said, "We don't cut Jap hair." Full uniform. And so this is what the Nisei fought with, and they had to deal with all the way for decades. And this was part of their battle record, okay? 14,000 awards. I'm going to read this to you, including, at the time, 1 Medal of Honor, 7 Presidential Unit Citations, 29 Distinguished Service Crosses, 560 Silver Stars with 28 Oak Leaf Clusters, 9,486 Purple Hearts, 4,000 Bronze Stars and 1,200 Oak Leaf Clusters, 22 Legion of Merits, 18 decorations from Allied nations. In 1962, for having saved the Lost Battalion, the governor of Texas made the 442nd honorary Texans. And in 2000, 55 years later, 55 years of discrimination that continued, 20 more Congressional Medals of Honor were awarded to men of the 442nd. It took 55 years and a new century to get that right. And then in 2011, a Congressional Gold Medal was awarded to the 442nd, the 100th Battalion, and the Military Intelligence Service. And the military, my dad was part of the Military Intelligence Service. And they were the ones who fought in Japan as interrogators, as interpreters, as negotiators. And so moving on, this is a memorial at the top of Mount Folgorito. Remember I told you where that cross was? This memorial stands to the 442nd. And this is a memorial at Camp Shelby today. They fought for America. They fought America's enemies. They fought prejudice and discrimination. They fought for a better life. They clearly fought for the American ideal. And they set the stage for guys like me and people like us. They really did. And they helped rebuild US and Japan relationships. And when you think about it, they were there at the end of the war. They were there at the beginning of the reconstruction of Japan. They were there when Russia wanted to take half of Japan like they took half of Germany. And so that's a pretty good relationship. That's a pretty good start of a really great relationship. And they won. And so they did set a new standard of respect for Japanese Americans and US-Japan relationships. It was all about them proving their loyalty. It was all about their love for their country and their families. It was all about the liberty that was taken away from them. And it has been such an honor for me to write this book and to share this story with the world, literally. And so they never spoke about it. One of the really interesting things is that my dad, he told me nothing. Nothing. I've learned more about my dad writing this book than he ever told me. They never spoke about it. Shiro Kishino never spoke about it until he realized that he was going to pass away. And it was all going to go with him unless he spoke up. They wanted the world to know. They want the world to know that this happened so that we never forget it. And that's why I wrote this book. So finally, I want to thank you for the honor. Now, I brought a bunch of books. And so if you guys would like a book, I'd like to give a book to each one of your families as a gift from me. Certainly to all of our distinguished guests, everybody here. If you want more, I've got more, but I'm going to have to charge you for them. But we'll talk about that later. But I have books for all of you, okay? Okay? So with that, thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you.